using things in ways that were disobedience. Yes, disobedience is what makes hackers who we are. Using things in ways that were never intended or allowed. Sometimes, to show there's a better way to do things, you need to break some rules. And a big way is violating unjust laws, civil disobedience. And I was partly inspired to give this talk because some of the biggest practitioners of criminal disobedience in this country today are the secret police. Unrepentant career criminals like Michael Hayden, who presided over the Bush warrantless wiretapping, and James Clapper, who lied to Congress repeatedly, disregard and weasel around the law when it's convenient for them to do so. They're telling us that the end justifies the means, so we can play that game too. We have a duty to civil disobedience in cases where the law is plainly wrong. And turning the United States into a surveillance state in the name of fighting terrorism, which is as a public health problem rivals the bubonic plague in this country, is worse than criminal. It's stupid. So we can't let the surveillance state stop us from doing what's correct. But remember back to the crypto wars, right? DCSS. To protect big media from hackers playing their legally purchased DVDs on their Linux laptops, DVD decryption code was illegal. That's a perfect example of a law that's worse than criminal. It's stupid because it only hurts people who are legitimately using media. And of course, hackers had a duty to stick up the ass of the people responsible for these laws. Making illegal t-shirts, making illegal ties, illegal games of Minesweeper. Now, of course, there are more or less trivial injustices to be disobedient to. From, at the low end, breaking some kind of bullshit EULA, all the way to using technology to resist truly tyrannical and oppressive regimes out there, which people are out on the ground doing right now. Mortaring the man. There's an app for that. Now, the point is that using technology to push boundaries is what people who come to this conference are supposed to do. And on the other side of this, which I'll return to in a little bit, is that you actually have no idea whether what you're doing is legal or illegal in many cases. None other than the Congressional Research Service has stated that they don't know the precise number of federal laws in effect in a region at a given time. So not even a good lawyer knows off the top of her head whether or not her client is doing something illegal. And then take into account that laws in this country and others are interpreted by historical precedents, and now it also matters when you're accused of doing something. So forget deliberate disobedience. People break the law all the time without knowing it, so you've got to be careful. Here's one of my favorite DEF CON examples. This slide is only just an illustration. It's an example of being disobedient for good. DEF CON is full of them. I think we can mostly agree that breaking into people's bank accounts that are not your own, is illegal. One of my favorite DEF CON moments was meeting the guy who hacked into the Nigerian scammers' back-end database, owned their bank account info, and got a little old lady's money back from them. I think this photo, by the way, should say, "Go see lovers." That's a missed opportunity. Leaking things is another disobedient act that's currently in vogue, and I think helpful to society. And a lot of stuff that's been leaked lately comes down to control of the internet. People with a lot more money and power than those of us in this room are trying to lock it down. And disobedience is part of resistance to that power and control. The lockdown internet, one without the freedom to share information, regardless of one's wealth or power, or regardless of what that information is a fucked up internet. And so we should refuse to be obedient to that. If you're going to deliberately disobey, of course, there's just one rule, and anyone that's been to Hacker Jeopardy knows what it is. So I want to get a shout out on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So the other reason I was inspired to give this talk is because I've been obsessively reading every single Snowden leak that's come out in the past year. And okay, that's fine for me, I can feel smug, but I wanted to contribute some of my insights on that back to the community and start to, be involved in the discussion here on that. So this talk is for everyone who hasn't had the free time to go through all of those leaks and to really pore over this stuff. If everyone in this room knows everything that I'm going to say, I'll be really happy. But probably that's not the case. And especially, people don't seem to be thinking about this stuff because people who should know better keep fucking it up. Remember this, the good old days, back when the internet hadn't yet transitioned to cat-based humor. Nowadays, it's more like on the internet, everyone knows you like ASCII goatsy. Google even suggests it. I'm sorry, it's just not a DEF CON talk without a goatsy. But seriously, the good old days were never that good. I'm not even really old school, and we were sniffing in the 90s. It's been a quarter century of realizing that the trust assumptions that underlie the early internet were completely wrong. And that attitude change, as slow as it's been, is a good thing. But even if you just shouldn't listen to anyone who's like, oh yeah, back in the day it was so much better. It wasn't that good, but it's definitely worse now, because now the business model of the entire internet is stockpiling, monitoring, and tracking your shit. And the real game changer is the storage. This is the Bluffdale, Utah NSA data center. Your shit out there is not just vulnerable temporarily when it's being transmitted, but it's stored to be mined later. Keith Alexander, when he came here at DEF CON 20, he pissed me the fuck off, because he came here and said, oh, you guys are so smart, right? Come and work for me. But he thinks that putting on, we're so smart, that putting on jeans and a t-shirt is enough to convince us, that, yeah, you're a good guy, even though your agency is preventing people like us from becoming who we are, preventing the next generation of hackers. Think about if someone walked around in our community with a tape recorder, shoving it in your face all the time, recording everything you said. You'd find it hard to accept that person as part of the community. You'd probably stop talking to that person entirely, but that's exactly what's happening. We have to remember that's what's happening, even though we can't see it in our faces. Collect it all, exploit it all, etc. And of course, we always assumed and suspected they were doing some of this stuff, but thanks to our friend Snowden, we now know they were doing what we long expected and more. And you've got to remember the government doublespeak here, right? When they say, we don't do this, that means we get our foreign partners to do this, and then they give it to us. When they say, oh, we don't collect that under this program, it means, yes, we collect that under a different program. So it's not just one particular TLA. So there's now a million ways to fuck it up, right? Not just in the moment, but going back in time. So if anything you do makes you some kind of personal interest, they can go back and find other interesting stuff to pin on you. Whether it's for parallel construction, right, so they don't have to admit how they know this stuff, or other reasons. And most of this is not the fault of technology, right? Think about the problems with technology. It has problems. We find bugs all the time, but the number of bugs is dwarfed by the number of errors that exist between the chair and the keyboard. So when people say they've got nothing to hide, you've heard this a million times before, everyone's got plenty to hide, right? Because they're the source of many of those problems. Everyone has always had something to hide, either now or in the past. If people had nothing to hide, a lot more people would post status messages to Facebook that said, just jerking off. For all the people in the audience, maybe a few that are feeling smug because they do that, you're morally consistent, but I would say lacking in long-term planning skills. So people who are trained to do sketchy shit and not fuck it up, including organized crime and the feds, two groups to which there's not an insignificant overlap, you'll hear terms like tradecraft and Opsec. Tradecraft means techniques and methods. And I'm going to throw up a few things here from our friends at the CIA, even though I'll make fun of them later. They spend a lot of time thinking about ways they can not fuck it up. And the best place to go when you're looking at CIA stuff, by the way, is analysis, not operations. Because operations is where they really fuck it up. But analysis, they spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. One thing, if you go to the CIA Tradecraft Manual, which this is from, you can download it and read it. There's a big thing about evaluating biases in analysis, and this stuff is also really useful for operations. I'll just go through a couple of these. Perceptual biases, right? Seeing what we want to see only. I think you can think of some CIA examples about that. Biases in terms of evaluating evidence for consistency. Small samples are more consistent but contain less information. Only relying on available models when estimating probability. And then problems with causality. For example, attributing events to fixed background context. Sunni's bad, Sunni's good, Shiite's bad, for example, something like that. All of these things transfer over to when we analyze our own operations when we're doing something bad. There are also a number of activities that you can do to counteract biases. And this is where the interesting stuff happens. This is just a quick selection that has a good crossover from analysis to operations. checking key assumptions at the beginning of the project or when the project changes, checking the quality of information, doing contrarian techniques like devil's advocacy, high impact, low probability, and what if, how that happened. And then, of course, things that we're all familiar with from pen testing, red team analysis, opposing force or adversary analysis. Do these things on your operations and look for where they're applicable. The other side of that is Opsec. People say that a lot in this community. It stands for operational security. It basically means preventing the leakage of information which could lead to discovery or advantage by the other side. This World War II image sums it up. And incidentally, on the topic of being old school, I showed this picture to someone under the age of 25 and they said, "Why is Gandhi the enemy?" I can't wait till all education comes from Wikipedia and IMDb. The government uses your tax dollars to produce literature to help you with Opsec. So you need to, you can go and check this stuff out. You need to understand what information is relevant, likely threats and vulnerabilities, risk assessment, and then applying countermeasures. And the point of this poster is, it's tough to see the little text, but you can look at it on the DEFCON DVD, that Opsec doesn't start and end with the operation itself. It covers all of your initial exploration and preparation, and then everything afterwards. So what you really want to get into a mindset is, you don't even know you're going to do it, and then you forget about it afterwards. Opsec is a 24/7 job. So here are my variant of the 7 deadly sins, the 7 deadly fuck-ups. What makes you a candidate for getting busted? Overconfidence, thinking, they'll never find me. I'm using an anonymization tool, so depending on a single tool or point of failure. Excessive trust. In surveillance states, for example in East Germany, 1 out of every 66 individuals was a government informant. What do you think that ratio is like in the hacking community? Emmanuel Goldstein estimates 1 in 5. Probably that's a high bound, but talk to Chelsea Manning, for example. I bet she's regretting the trust model in the community. Conviction that your guilt is minor and no one's going to care. No one's going to care about what I'm doing. I'm just defacing a website, for example. It's all going in your permanent record. Guilt by association. Visiting the wrong chat room. Coming to the wrong conference. Being associated with the wrong people. Like the real estate people say, location, location, location. Exposing where you're coming from is always likely to fuck you up. It can expose you to many things besides just reverse exploitation, which the government has been doing. Of course, sending anything in the clear, not just personal identifying information, but browser fingerprints, unique device IDs, locations you are or might be at in the future. Keeping too much documentation about what's going on. People who are really fighting the state and doing serious business know about this stuff. This is a quote from a Ukrainian separatist. Home computers and personal cell phones should never be used for operational purposes. Identifying documents should never be carried. Details of military operations should never be discussed on phones or in front of family members. You may even need to do things that you don't like to do, like abstaining from alcohol. Like sins, you're gonna commit one of these. You're gonna fuck one of these up. So use your tradecraft analysis to figure out how you can recover from making mistakes. One of the things that you can use to stop fucking things up are tools. But tools can also help you fuck it up. A computer is just a tool to help you fuck things up a billion times faster than you could do by yourself. They increase confidence. The sin of overconfidence, that's the likelihood of fucking it up. Using a tool badly or stupidly can be worse than not using it at all. This is one of my favorite tool injury pictures, or tool hazard pictures, because this is from the water jet cutter. It puts out a stream of compressed water at 15,000 psi, breaks the sound barrier, and cuts through inch-thick steel, and everyone who walks in the room is like, what would happen if I stuck my hand in that thing? So here's the first tool, VPNs. You're going to use an insecure network. Are you safe? 2 questions when it comes to tools. Should I use it, and how should I use it? What do you get from a VPN? Well, you get some traffic encryption, but only between you and the VPN itself, not necessarily from the VPN to the remote location. You may get a little bit of location obfuscation to the remote server, right? They may not know exactly where you are. Maybe you get some request concealment to the ISP between you and the VPN, not afterwards. So it really depends on where the listener is located. It's a single hop proxy. So anyone who's watching both ends, like a state agency, can do traffic correlation very, very easily. It also shifts the trust model over to the VPN provider. VPN clients vary on how well they hook you up. They can leak information depending on the client. I've seen this myself. So if you plan on hiding behind a VPN, then you better see what the client lets you expose. Connect to the VPN, run Wireshark or another packet sniffer on another computer and see what's coming out of the computer that you're going to use for operations. Is everything going through the VPN or not? If this small amount of thing is too much effort for you, then internet scofflaw is probably not the job for you. You should work for the government instead. Here's a simple test for the lazy. Open up an SSH connection and then fire up your VPN and see if it drops. If it stays open, then stuff is still being leaked. Existing connections are allowed to go through and all kinds of things could be phoning out with your real IP. A lot of VPN clients are also shitty for mobile use. Every time you put your computer to sleep or move around, the tunnel goes down and you have to reconnect. When that happens, every freaking app on your computer phones home and tries immediately to reconnect before the VPN reconnects and exposes your IP. Mail clients, browsers with open tabs that decide to reload them, browsers that are doing all kinds of JavaScripts in the background that are communicating. All your shit is exposed. If this applies to you, make sure all this stuff is shut down before you close the VPN. So even if it's as simple as doing a kill all minus stop, that's impossible to read, that's what it says. Think about everything that could possibly phone home. Stopping it before you close the VPN is a good habit to get into. Of course, habits are fragile. You'll eventually fuck it up, so try and automate that process. Another thing on that subject, randomize your MAC address. It's already been exposed that the Canadian government was probably illegally tracking people using airport Wi-Fi in their MAC addresses so they could see where people were moving around in various airports. So I like to randomize my MAC address, as often as not too inconvenient. So should you use a VPN? What kind of a list does it get you on? VPNs have their uses and their flaws. So if you're going up against the big guys and they're on both sides of the VPN, traffic correlation is trivial. Simply using a VPN also makes you look interesting. So this is from the XKeyscore manual of 2008. You've got to also remember with XKeyscore, this is not a real-time traffic processor. This is a database miner. It's a set of filters to store data. People often say to me, you should be on a list. Well, I use a VPN when I travel, especially, so I'm definitely on some sort of list. This is from Pacific SIGDev in March 2011. Also, Matt mentions ingesting and storing VPN data. Once again, looking at identifying VPN use and then finding out ways to get into those networks. Mentioned a program called Birdwatch. We know nothing more about this, but clearly some sort of data mining program that perhaps could be put to use collecting VPN key exchanges for later cryptanalysis. By the way, this is also from Pacific SIGDev. I'm really pleased to see in this presentation we got a category of our own right next to terrorists, criminal groups, and foreign intelligence agencies. So we're in the big time. Here's another NSA slide, Black Pearl, a survey database from the taps on the undersea fiber optic cables, presumably providing high-level communication of things such as communications having a foreign endpoint, because technically they're only allowed to look at things with a foreign endpoint. They think they can collect everything. It only counts as far as domestic data collection if they look at it. This is that sort of legal weaseling. So once again, using VPNs is something that can attract attention. This was reported as a tool for specifically targeting private networks, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So using a VPN puts you on a radar. Is that something? Is that a reason not to use it? I don't think so, but because you might as well make things more difficult for them. But perhaps in certain cases, you should be aware of it when you do your tradecraft analysis. Here's another one about intercepting and decrypting VPN traffic. This is the Hammerstein slides, referring to doing a man-in-the-middle attack on VPN traffic via compromised network routers with implants inserted. So these refer to selected decrypted content. So the good news is that going through all this trouble probably means that it's not all vulnerable. But at least some of it, no doubt, refers to crypto attacks on PPTP VPNs, known compromised since about 2012. Moxie Marlin Spike and David Holton's DEFCON 20 presentation and release of Cloud Tracker for PPTP. So a VPN is probably still worthwhile, but you've got to make sure it's up to date. And don't just rely on that one thing. One thing you can do if you're truly paranoid is hop VPNs every few minutes. Some providers even offer this service within a single provider. Again, you're depending on one DEFCON for catastrophic liver damage without raising your insurance premiums. So it pisses me off when people say that Tor is only for illegal ads, right? Don't fuck up Tor by only using it when you're doing sketchy shit. Pump a whole bunch of your normal traffic through it. Even if you're completely squeaky clean and you're not doing anything wrong, still use Tor because that helps out everyone else. Also, the nature of Tor is for anonymity. It's really tough to tell people that you're using Tor for good. But if you can, if you've got a use that you can talk about, get it out there. Tweet, hashtag, something like Tor for good. The Tor devs will appreciate it. But let's talk a little bit about people who should know better who fucked it up using Tor. We all remember this. Sabu, lolsec and anti-sec, 4chan anons trolling the web for SQL injection vulnerabilities, DDoSing websites, stumping user account databases, and taking down high-profile things that were really going to get them in trouble, like the CIA's website. They were coordinating an IRC channels accessed by Tor. The feds discovered that, monitored the channels, waited for someone to fuck it up. Sabu committed the sin of packet origin, logs in just once without using Tor, gets owned immediately. A few seconds later, gets turned into a snitch, because what's he going to do, right? He's facing decades of federal imprisonment. So even though he'd been doxxed months prior, at that point, it's confirmed, he goes snitch. So that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what happened to Jeremy Hammond. He gets identified from information in recorded chat logs with Sabu. The feds log that packet metadata from his Wi-Fi access point. They get a regular trap register, pen register, trap and trace order, standard wiretapping, right? They match his MAC address of his computer to packets going to a Tor entry node. Correlate the times of Tor access, his Tor access on his Wi-Fi access point to his presence, his ID in the IRC channel. So a traffic correlation attack, not of the normal kind that we think of when we think about Tor. So there's no compromise necessary of Tor to acquire the circumstantial evidence that eventually put Jeremy Hammond away. So the moral of that story is don't fail unsafe with Tor. That's the Sabu moral. Practice hygiene. If it's going to matter that you're doing this, then don't have two browsers open even, right? In case you accidentally type something into something that's not the Tor browser. Make sure everything, even your DNS, goes through Tor. Use a separate machine that's proven to only connect through Tor. It's a very good idea. Or if you want to firewall it, use a firewall like pfSense to make sure that all the traffic from your network goes through Tor. And then check what you're exposing. Go to something like ipcheck.info and make sure that things are not being exposed. And of course, don't only use Tor for operations. Don't provide the correlation of Tor usage with doing bad things. And of course, Opsec is 24/7. This is a chat on Reddit with Sabu after he was a snitch, saying, keep your Opsec up 24/7. Friends will try and take you down if they have to. Yes, never a truer word spoken by a Fed snitch at that time. Another one we've all heard about, Harvard student. A bomb threat gets called into Harvard during exams. It takes a matter of hours before the perp is uncovered as a student freaking out about exams. Use Tor to connect to Gorilla Mail, which adds an originating IP header. So a lot of Opsec fails in this case, but mainly the folly of only using privacy tools when you're up to no good. Privacy should be had for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. Privacy is like bacon. It makes everything better. So here's how we fucked it up. Harvard's network requires you to register your MAC address. And one of the reasons why MIT is better than Harvard, because we don't do that. But Harvard requires registration tied to MAC address, and they log the outgoing traffic. So these things provided multiple potential vectors for this guy to fuck it up. Again, no compromise of Tor necessary. And this is kind of a microcosm, okay, at one university of pervasive surveillance and pervasive correlation. Because there's lots of ways that those two things put together could have fucked it up for him. For example, investigators could look at who went and downloaded the Tor browser bundle right before the bomb threat got called in. Or look at everyone who connected to a known Tor entry node at browser is good because it doesn't store those cookies. And also quantum methods for delivering exploits to the computer, like the Fox Acid program. You can look that up, I won't talk about it. So some of that certainly should give you pause about how safe Tor is as a single solution. Don't ever use single solutions. But the good news for regular Tor usage is that it makes things harder. And this is the third document released at the same time, saying the system, as far as low latency and anonymity goes, is still the king. Similarly, a lot of counter-Tor efforts going to client-side exploitation. So Tails gets a positive review from the secret police, adds severe computer and network exploitation misery to the equation. So what does all this tell me? Tor does put you on the radar, and Tor and Tails do make these people's lives harder. And that's a risk trade-off you need to think about. So how I think about it is that using it puts you on a list, a big list. And if your disobedient acts would put you on a much, much smaller list, right? The list of people warranting serious attention, then it's probably worth being on that big list as well. And the more people who are on that big list, the better it is. Also, security of your whole system is still more important in the big picture than any one single element. Or to put it another way, there doesn't seem to be a critical flaw in Tor that makes all these other attacks unnecessary. But if your life or your freedom depend on it, don't ever trust one single element. This includes Tor and lots of other tools in your communications chain. Do your tradecraft. One example I like to use, I like how it says on CryptoCat's website, you should never trust your life or your freedom to software. I think that's slightly overstating the problem, right? Because we trust our lives to software pretty much every day, every time we get in a car or an airplane. But when you get in a car, you also put on your seatbelt. It's like the old Islamic proverb, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel. Here's some more good news. The big list and the small list. This is the recently leaked X-key score filter rules. I know this is totally unreadable, but basically these ones show the security agencies are hell-bent on making that big list as big as possible. Anyone who connects to the Tor directory service or the Tor website gets put on that big list. In terms of the stated mission of the secret police, this is great. This is akin to looking for a needle in a haystack by piling on more hay. Great work. This is really good. It's still upsetting and concerning that they're targeting everyone who uses Tor, especially in that it's worse than criminal, it's stupid way, but no more so than the rest of the blanket surveillance that we're talking about. It just reinforces we need more people using these services. This part is worse. This is what I mentioned, collecting the address suing the NSA about this right now. They log the signal strength at cell towers to get your location. Every time the phone is turned on or moves, there's a record. And the number that is used to activate the phone or the SIM is also recorded. And also the purchases. They'll go back to security video from Walmart or where you got it from. So here's what you've got to do if you want to use a burner phone securely. Purchase them a long time in advance before the operation. Register them far away from the operations area. Use false information when you register them.
this is an image of the mail that Lee Harvey Oswald